Okay, President Trump with a new warning for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy today. Here it is on Truth Social. Think of it. A modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization, in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelenskyy admits more than half the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections and is very low in Ukrainian polls. And the only thing he was good at, playing Biden like a fiddle, a dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast, or he's going to not have a country left. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating to end the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden tried, he says, and failed to bring peace. He wants to keep the gravy train going, he says. And we bring in General Jack Keane, who looks at all of this with us this afternoon. General, always good to have you with us. Fox's senior strategic analyst, former vice chief of staff of the Army and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. General, your reaction to this very strongly worded post against Volodymyr Zelenskyy?
Yeah, well, actually, the both of them have been lashing out at each other, and Trump obviously a little bit more publicly and comprehensively than Zelenskyy. And it's really unfortunate, Martha, because President Trump and President Zelenskyy both want the same thing, and that is an enduring peace agreement that protects the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine going forward. And let's face it, this was not going to be accomplished under the previous administration. Putin wasn't about to talk to Biden on any circumstances and refused any overtures about a peace agreement. Putin is at the negotiating table with his team now and had that phone call with the president on Wednesday. And the president wasn't sure that Putin would accept some kind of negotiations that could lead to a peace agreement because he's been obstinate about opposing it in the past. But he said yes. And I think the meeting that took place in Saudi Arabia that we all witnessed was to see if that actually had some strength to it, that it just wasn't propaganda. And the evidence, from our team that was there, it looks like they are willing to do some serious negotiations. I think Zelenskyy overreacted to the fact that he wasn't at that meeting. And he really didn't need to be at that meeting. That was feeling the temperature, so to speak. Is Putin really bluffing to make things look good on a world stage? Is he going to play for real? Because we all know his history. He games these negotiations to his favor and manipulates others, etc. So it turns out to have some substance. But I think that frustrated the president. Then the other underlying thing here that hasn't received that much public notice is that the Trump administration presented to Zelenskyy a deal over the minerals, where the United States would get a stake in the $26 trillion of minerals that are in Ukraine, confirmed by a geological survey company out of Canada that's quite credible. And as a result of that, that would pay back the investment the United States has made in Ukraine over the last couple of years, last 3 years, with weapons and humanitarian economic assistance, but also a long-term strategic economic investment in Ukraine, which would have benefit to Ukraine and also to the United States. But Zelenskyy and his team rejected those terms, not the deal. And I think that really frustrated the president. They are coming up with a counterproposal to do this. I think, given the reality of what we're facing and the fact that both presidents want the same thing, and believe me, both presidents know for a fact that Putin is a thug, he's a killer, he's committed genocide inside of Ukraine, that all the casualties that are out there are a result of an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, and that Putin is a bit of a pathological liar and manipulates negotiations. They both know that. President Trump doesn't talk about it in those terms because I think he believes in personal diplomacy. And, he praises President Xi. He praised Kim Jong-un until he knew Kim Jong-un was bluffing and there was no deal to be had, and he walked out, remember, in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the reality is that is why, he sings Putin's praises a bit, because he wants to promote positive relationship to see if he can make a deal of substance. I think this debate, this lashing out at each other, is temporary. I don't believe it's long-lasting, because our common interests are at stake here, and they will come together and work something out here. And I think the counterproposal that Zelensky's team is putting together will go a long way to accomplish that.
Let me ask you this. He says that Zelenskyy has a 4% approval rating. The numbers that we have seen are more in the 50% range, north of 50% range. And he's criticizing Zelenskyy for not holding elections. Now, clearly, this is something that Russia would like to see happen, because they would love to get a Yanukovych or somebody who, is much more favorable to Russia into that seat. Is the president undermining the election process? And can an election take place in the middle of this war at all, General?
Well, a couple of things. Yeah, Zelensky's polling as of February this month is 57% favorable. It was 52 in December. I mean, it was in the 90s in 22 when the war started. But obviously, he got very favorable ratings. Look at the Constitution that Ukraine has prohibits elections when you declare martial law because of a state of war takes place. And obviously, the incumbent who is trying to run a war to be involved in an election and bringing people together in primaries and other elections puts the people at risk. There's two other parts of that martial law. If you're 18 to 60 years of age and a male, you can't leave the country. And also they're curbing civil liberties, particularly freedom of movement, by curfews in the contested areas. So the fact that their constitution is driving this, the parliament, bipartisan support for all the extensions they've had to the martial law. So they are acting democratically, in my judgment, in abiding by their constitution, and also the parliament is supporting it, which represents the people throughout the country. These are democratic actions taking place in a democratic country. I don't believe we should try and push elections on Zelenskyy during the middle of this war. I think if there is a peace agreement, I think Zelenskyy and others and the people themselves will demand an election, and it would likely take place assuming the peace agreement has some real legs to it.
Okay. I know that the Institute for the Study of War said that your organization, that you do not believe that any of his broad ambitions, Putin's broad ambitions, have changed. So one of the big questions that we'll talk about next time we meet, General, is whether or not Putin is going to give any concessions as part of an agreement here. And we'll get more details as this moves along. General, thank you very much. Great to have you with us today.
Yeah, great talking to you, Martha.
Thank you, sir.